Welcome to Hockey Whiz Talks podcast. Today I'll be talking about 3 players to watch ahead of camp before the 23-24 season. In this podcast, I'll be talking about 3 players to watch ahead of camp ahead of the season for every NHL team. Fabian Lysell. Fabian Lysell was the Bruins' first round pick back in 2021. He had 37 points in 54 games with the Providence Bruins last season. He was also a part of Sweden at the U20 World Junior Championships in 2023, but he is infamous for recording 0 points in 7 games. He is a player to watch at camp because looking at the Bruins' third line, it is projected to be Morgan Geekie, AJ Greer, and Trent Frederick. I believe adding Fabian Lysell to the third line would be very beneficial to the Bruins. He would bring some much added scoring depth to that third line. Ian Mitchell was one of the top deep prospects for the Chicago Blackhawks. He was traded alongside Alec Regula to the Boston Bruins in exchange for Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno. Mitchell didn't do much last season. He appeared in just 35 games at the NHL level, recording 8 points. At the AHL level, he appeared in just 5 games, recording 6 points. But the year before that, he appeared in 57 AHL games, recording 35 points. While I do not expect Ian Mitchell to become a full-time regular this season with Kevin Shattenkirk on the team, he could become a good injury replacement in case one of the Bruins defensemen get injured. Jakub Lauko was a third-round pick of the Bruins back in 2018. He has yet to really break out for them, but here's hoping that he does finally break out in 2023-24. Last season with the Providence Bruins, he scored 17 points in 35 games, and with the big club, he recorded 7 points in 23 games. While you don't expect Jakub Lauko to be a significant contributor offensively, he could be a major piece of the bottom 6 for Boston this year. Matthew Savoy, Noah Ostlund, and Yuri Kulich were all first-round picks back in 2022 for the Buffalo Sabres. All of them are really talented individuals who have the potential to be top 6 talent. While they may not make the team this year, they could make an impression on the coaches and could get called up in case of injury. Matthew Savoy had 95 points in 62 games as part of the Winnipeg Ice last season in the WHL, as well as 29 points in 19 playoff games. Yuri Kulich scored 46 points in 62 games with the Rochester Americans in the AHL, as well as 7 goals and 9 points in 7 games at the U20 World Junior Championships. Noah Ostlund scored 26 points in 37 games for Djurgården IF in Sweden's Tier 2 league. Edvinsson, the smooth-skating 6'4 defenseman, was drafted with his 6th pick in the 2021 draft. He has very high expectations in Detroit. He had 27 points in 52 games with Grand Rapids last season. If he can make an impression out of camp, he will definitely get a chance to make the team out of camp, at least for 10 days. Marco Kasper was Detroit's first-round pick in 2022, 8th overall. At the time, it was viewed by many as a reach. Now, Marco Kasper is viewed as a very good prospect. Kasper had 23 points in 52 games in the SHL last season, which is really good for an 18-year-old player. But where he really made the noise was in the Champions League, where he recorded 4 goals and 9 points in 10 games. Carter Mazur scored 22 goals and 37 points in 40 games for the University of Denver and the NCAA, and also recorded 4 points in 10 games with USA at the World Championships. With Grand Rapids, he scored 6 points in 6 games. Looking at the Red Wings roster, it is not out of the possibility that Mazur and Edvinsson make the roster, considering Robbie Fabry gets hurt easily, and if Edvinsson can really impress the coaches out of camp, who says he doesn't replace Gostisbehere or Mata? I included Spencer Knight in this list because he was granted the permission by the NHL to practice with Panthers prospects after returning from the NHL and NHLPA Player Assistance Program, which he entered February 24th under the terms of the joint program. He is definitely a player to monitor because he will be an essential player for the Panthers if he is healthy moving forward. Grigory Denisenko, the former first-round pick of the Panthers back in 2018, is really in a make-or-break year. He is slotted to be on the third line alongside Anton Lundell and East Tuulis-Turainen. However, if he disappoints or does not live up to the expectation of him, he could easily get replaced by somebody else. The prospect who could turn everyone's eyes at camp is the former first-round pick back in 2021, Maki Samoskevich. Samoskevich plays for the University of Michigan. Last season, he scored 20 goals and 43 points in 39 games. And although he only played 2 games with the Charlotte Checkers, he scored 2 points. And then in the playoffs, he scored 4 points in 7 games. Samoskevich is a player to monitor in camp because if he does well and he plays well in college, the Panthers definitely could try to persuade him to leave college early to join the team, especially if Grigory Denisenko struggles. David Reinbacher is the first-round pick in 2023 for the Montreal Canadiens. He was drafted 5th overall and has very high expectations of him. Because of how weak the Canadiens' defense is, it is not out of the possibility that he makes the team out of camp as an 18-year-old. Owen Beck played for 2 teams last year, the Peterborough Petes of the OHL and the Mississauga Steelheads of the OHL. With the Mississauga Steelheads, he scored 41 points in 30 games before being traded to the Peterborough Petes, where he scored 25 points in 30 games and then 16 points in 22 playoff games. While I don't think Owen Beck will make the team out of camp this year, he's definitely a player to monitor at camp because he's one of the more talented prospects in their system. Another 2022 draft pick, Philip Mesar, is also a player to watch. Mesar had 51 points in 52 games with the Kitchener Rangers, as well as 6 points in 5 games with Slovakia at the U20 World Junior Championships. What's really going to help Mesar is his versatility. His ability to play right wing, left wing, and center is going to help him get to the NHL much faster. Ridley Gregg was drafted 28th overall at the end of the first round by the Ottawa Senators. After scoring 15 goals and 29 points in 39 games at the AHL level for the Belleville Senators, he was promoted to the Ottawa Senators, where he scored 9 points in 20 games. Ridley Gregg will without a doubt make the roster and play a bigger part of the offense this year. Tyler Boucher, the 10th overall pick in 2021, is another player to watch for. Boucher only played in 21 games last season, but he did record 10 goals and 17 points. He played pretty well for US at the U20 World Junior Championships, recording 3 goals and 4 points in 6 games. He is one of the contenders to beat out Matthew Joseph for the third-line right-wing role. Robbie Gerventi is another player to watch. He recorded 16 goals and 30 points in 40 games last season with the Belleville Senators. While highly unlikely he makes the team, you never know how many injuries the Senators will get next season, so you'll never know when you'll need one of your prospects to step up. Lucas Edmonds is a dynamic point-scoring machine. He scored 34 goals and 113 points in 68 games with the Kingston Frontenacs in the 21-22 season. But in the 22-23 season with the Syracuse Crunch of the AHL, he recorded 15 goals and 27 points in 49 games. Edmonds needs to work on consistency if he wants to be a top 6 caliber player. Maxim Grashev split last season between the VHL and KHL. He had the vast majority of his success in the VHL, netting 9 goals and 18 points in 22 games. With the SKA St. Petersburg club of the KHL, he was able to put up 6 points in 34 games, which is pretty good. There definitely is an opening on that third-line left-wing role. If he impresses out of camp, he could definitely beat out Michael Esmont. Ilya Yushu was an undrafted player out of Belarus. He scored 16 points in 57 games last season with the Syracuse Crunch. You don't expect him to be much of a dynamic point-scoring machine in the NHL, but who's to say he can't be a good fourth-line player for them? Looking at their roster, Luke Glendening is their fourth-line center, and with his age, he can't play forever. So it's always good to get another fourth-line center in the pipeline. Nick Robertson played pretty well until he got injured. He recorded 5 points in 15 games for the Toronto Maple Leafs last season. Although with the upgraded depth chart, he will find it increasingly difficult to make the team out of camp. It's more than likely that Nick Robertson begins the season in the AHL, and if anyone gets injured in the top 6, he'll be the first call-up. Topi Niemela is the top defensive prospect for Toronto. Although he isn't anything special, he is a really solid defensive defenseman. He only recorded 18 points in 58 games, although he has proven that he is capable of logging heavy minutes. Ronnie Harvonen is another player to watch for. He recorded 28 points in 57 games. He was knocked out at a scrimmage at development camp. It remains to be seen if he can work his way back from the hit. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my scouting blog at hockeywiz777scouting.com. Listen to my scouting blog podcast on podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/hockeywiz777scouting. It seems like Ryzen Suzuki has been in the pipeline forever, and it could be finally his time to make the NHL roster. With Jack Drury trying to request a trade from the team, there seems to be an opening for the fourth line center role. Could Ryan Suzuki take the place of Jack Drury on that fourth line center role? It remains to be seen. Noel Gunler was drafted in 2020, 41st overall by the Carolina Hurricanes. He only played in 31 games last season, but recorded 18 points. He has really good size and has some pretty raw talent. They'll have to monitor how he does during camp, but it's highly unlikely he makes the roster. The other center is Vasily Ponomarev. He recorded 24 goals and 46 points in 64 games with the Chicago Wolves last season. He could be an excellent solution for that fourth line center role. Adam Fantilli was obviously Columbus's third overall pick in the 2023 draft, and he is expected to play a big role on the team this season. However, where he starts this season will be determined on how he plays out of camp. That will be definitely something to pay attention to. Another highly touted prospect for Columbus is David Jiricek. The 6th overall pick in 2022 is regarded as one of the best prospect defensemen in the entire NHL. If he shows out at camp, who's to say he doesn't get a top 4 role this season? The other player I want to mention is Yegor Chinakhov. It seems like Yegor Chinakhov is lost in the shuffle a lot because of the many prospects coming into Columbus' system, but Yegor Chinakhov could be the perfect third or fourth line forward. I think Chinakhov could be an upgrade over Matthew Oliver on the fourth line. Simon Nemec was the 2nd overall pick in the 2022 draft by the New Jersey Devils. He is a very highly touted prospect and is one of the best defensive prospects in the entire NHL. While he may not make the roster out of camp because the right side of the defense is loaded, if any of their defensemen get injured, he will be the first defenseman called up. Another top prospect to pay attention to is Nolan Foote. Nolan Foote was traded to the New Jersey Devils as part of the Blake Coleman trade. It could be finally Nolan Foote's turn to crack the roster. But with the recent additions of Thomas Nosek and Chris Tierney, Nolan Foote would really have to impress out of camp to make the roster. Another prospect to pay attention to is Chase Stillman. While Alexander Holtz is still a favorite to be the third line right wing, Chase Stillman isn't far behind. He was the first round pick of the Devils back in 2021. He recorded 48 points in 59 games for the Peterborough Petes in the OHL, along with 13 points in 21 playoff games. Chase Stillman is your prototypical third-line player. While he could have top 6 potential, I see him more like a third-line player that really thrives in playoff time. William Dufour was a 5th round pick of the New York Islanders back in 2020. However, he is one of the favorites to make the roster out of camp, as there is an opening for that third-line right-wing role. Another player who is in contention for that third-line right-wing role is Simon Holmstrom. Holmstrom was a former first-round pick of the Islanders back in 2019. He played in 50 games last season for the Islanders, but only recorded 9 points. Although there isn't any opening on the defense for the Islanders, Calle Odelius is definitely a player to watch in camp. He really impressed in Sweden for Djurgården, as well as for Sweden in the World Juniors. While he isn't likely to make the team out of camp, injuries happen, and if he impresses the coaching staff, he could replace Sebastian Aho next season. Because the Rangers lineup is left-wing heavy, Brendan Othmann will find it increasingly difficult to make the roster unless he can play right wing. On another team, he will without a doubt be one of the favorites to make the team out of camp. He put up 18 goals and 43 points in 40 games with the Peterborough Petes, after putting up 24 points in 16 games with the Flint Firebirds. The playoffs is where he really did the damage. He scored 8 goals and 25 points in 23 playoff games in that playoff run. Othmann was also part of Canada's gold-winning World Junior Championship team, where he tallied 6 points in 7 games. Adam Sikora is another player to pay attention to. He had a solid season for HK Nitra in the Slovak League, putting up 21 points in 38 games, along with 4 points in 8 playoff games. Both Othmann and Sikora are contenders for that third-line right-wing role. Although unlikely to make the team, Bryce McConnell-Barker had a very successful season last year with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds of the OHL, putting up 30 goals and 77 points in 68 games. The former University of Denver product Bobby Brink had a a somewhat disappointing season for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms of the AHL, where he only had 28 points in 41 games. However, with how thin the depth chart for Philly will be next season, he will be a contender to make the roster, especially if they trade away Travis Konechny. Another player to watch out for out of camp is Ty Forrester. Eligible at right wing and center, Forrester was a former first-round pick of the Flyers back in 2020, who recorded 20 goals and 48 points in 66 games with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms of the AHL before being promoted to the NHL, where he recorded 7 points in 8 games with the Flyers. The Flyers definitely have a lack of center depth, especially if Sean Couturier is going to be out. If Ty Forrester can play center, there definitely is an opening for him to make the team. The other player to watch out for is Emil Andre. After putting up 26 points in 51 games with HV71 of the SHL, Andre went over to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms of the AHL, where he recorded 6 points in 10 games. The Flyers don't really need any defensemen right now. However, if Emil Andre impresses out of camp, he definitely could beat out Nick Seeler. Samuel Poulin has been in the prospect pool forever. He was a first-round pick of the Penguins back in 2019. He only played in 15 games with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, but did record 4 goals. He also appeared in 3 games with the NHL club and recorded 1 point. This is really a make or break year for Samuel Poulin. If he does not show out, you pretty much have to declare him a lost pick or a bust. There is room on that fourth line for Samuel Poulin to make the team, or if they can some way get Mikael Granlund off the team, there is some room on that left wing on the third line. Owen Pickering was a first-round pick of the Penguins in 2022. The 6'4" defenseman put up 45 points in 61 games with the Swift Current Broncos of the WHL and also played 8 games with Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. He will be one of the contenders to make the team out of camp. Ty Smith is another player you should pay attention to out of camp. He was acquired in a trade for John Marino. Smith put up 24 points in 39 games for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins in the AHL, along with 4 points in 9 games at the NHL level, as well as 4 points in 9 games at the NHL level. It might be difficult for these two players to make the team out of camp, as the Penguins are trying to assemble a team with as much veteran presence as possible. A first-round pick of the Capitals in 2022, Ivan Miroshnichenko was regarded as a top 5 talent in that draft, but slid due to the Russian factor and health issues. He played for 3 different teams in Russia last season. He played in 23 games for Avangard Omsk in the VHL, where he recorded 3 points in 4 games. And he also recorded 10 goals and 14 points in 12 games with Omsky Yasperi of the MHL. He also played in the MHL for the playoffs, recording 7 points in 16 playoff games. Although one of the smaller players, Andrew Crystal completely lit up the WHL, scoring 39 goals and 95 points in 54 games. He was also a part of Team Canada at the U18 World Junior Championships. Hendrix Lapierre is another player to pay attention to. Although he only had 30 points in 60 games at the AHL level and 6 points in 20 games in the playoffs with the Hershey Bears, he seems like a prime candidate to step into a fourth-line center role. Check out my hockey blog at hockeywiztalkshockey.blogspot.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at hockeywiz777. Although Logan Cooley definitely could make the Coyotes roster, it's highly unlikely as he's likely going to be playing for the University of Michigan. Still, it's worth paying attention to him at camp to see what they have in their future. Connor Geekie was drafted with the 11th pick in the 2022 draft. The 6'3" center, 35 goals and 77 points in 66 games with the Winnipeg Ice of the WHL. He also put up 17 points in 19 playoff games as well. Josh Doan put up 16 goals and 38 points in 39 games with Arizona State University of the NCAA, as well as 6 points in 14 games for the Tuscan Roadrunners of the AHL. Of the 3 players mentioned, he is the most likely player to make the roster out of camp, because he doesn't have that high of a ceiling. Of course, everyone this summer has been paying attention to Connor Bedard. He is perhaps the only reason why anyone cares about Chicago this season. The Chicago Blackhawks are not expected to be very good, but fans will watch Chicago just to see Connor Bedard play. Another player to really watch out for is Lukas Reichel. Reichel was a first-round pick of the Chicago Blackhawks in 2020. He scored 20 goals and 51 points in 55 games with the Rockford IceHawks of the AHL before being promoted to the Chicago Blackhawks of the NHL, where he scored 7 goals and 15 points in 23 games. He will be a major part of the first line alongside Connor Bedard this season. The left side of Chicago's defense is very weak, and for this reason, a player like Kevin Korchinski could definitely make the roster out of camp. Kevin Korchinski was the 7th overall pick in the 2022 draft. Last year, he had 11 goals and 73 points in 54 games with the Seattle Thunderbirds of the WHL, along with 14 points in 19 games in the playoffs. Korchinski also played for Canada at the U20 World Junior Championships, where he recorded 4 points in 7 games. All 3 of these players could be impactful players this season for Chicago. Oskar Olausson was picked at the end of the first round in the 2021 draft by the Colorado Avalanche, 28th overall. Olausson only had 20 points in 63 games last season with the Colorado Eagles of the AHL. He definitely could benefit from playing in the AHL another season. However, a solid showing in camp definitely could help him out down the line. Calum Ritchie is a big center who was drafted 27th overall in the 2023 draft by Colorado. He recorded 24 goals and 59 points in 59 games for the Oshawa Generals, along with 6 points in 5 playoff games. At the U18 World Junior Championships, Ritchie put up 9 points in 7 games. At the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, Calum Ritchie recorded 10 points in 5 games with 4 goals. Justice Onunen is perhaps the future of Colorado in goal. The big 6'4" goalie out of Finland had a great year in the AHL last season, putting up a 2.54 GAA and .916 save percentage in 41 starts. While it's not likely he makes the team out of camp, if he impresses, he will be the first called up if Georgiev or Fansos get injured. Because Logan Stankoven is only 5'8", the Dallas Stars were able to steal him with the 47th pick in the 2021 draft. Stankoven put up 34 goals and 97 points in 48 games with the Kamloops Blazers of the WHL to go along with 10 goals and 30 points in 14 games in the playoffs. In the U20 World Juniors, Stankoven continued to impress, putting up 11 points in 7 games, helping Canada win the gold medal. In the Memorial Cup, Stankoven put up 9 points in 4 games. Maverick Bourque put up 20 goals and 47 points in 70 games with the Texas Stars last season. He was drafted 30th overall by the Dallas Stars back in 2020. He could make a solid 3rd or 4th line center down the road. Defenseman Leon Beichel stands a towering 6'6", 216. He was the 18th overall pick back in 2022 and has a massive ceiling. It's not likely that he makes the roster, but it will be interesting to see him in camp to see where he is in his progression. Jesper Wallstedt is currently the top prospect goalie in the entire NHL. He'll be in line to be the starting goalie for Minnesota when Marc-Andre Fleury finally decides to retire. But for now, he is a player to watch at training camp to see how far along he is in his development. Last year with the Iowa Wild, Wallstedt put up a 2.68 GAA and a .908 save percentage in 38 starts. Another player to watch at camp is Brock Faber. Acquired in the Kevin Fiala trade, Brock Faber is one of the players who is in line for a major role on the team this season. Faber put up 27 points in 38 games with the University of Minnesota last season. If Faber plays well out of camp, he definitely could beat out Kalen Addison and play a top 4 role, pushing Addison to a 3rd pair role. Danilo Yurov is a very highly hyped Russian player who was drafted in 2022, 24th overall. He was regarded as a top 10 talent in that draft, but fell due to the Russian factor. He is definitely a player to watch out for at training camp. However, he did just re-up with his KHL club, so they'll have to wait on him, just like they did Kaprizov. At the time of the 2020 draft, Yaroslav Askarov was hyped to be the next coming of Carey Price. However, so far, he has been far from that. But that's not to say he can't still be a solid starting goalie. Last season, with the AHL affiliate Milwaukee Admirals, he had a 2.69 GAA and .911 save percentage in 48 starts during the regular season. And in 12 playoff games, he had a 2.70 GAA and .903 save percentage. With UC Saros locked into the number 1 role, it's a very interesting situation in Nashville. He'll never be the number 1 there as long as UC Saros is there, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that they trade him away to try and acquire other assets for the team. Nashville's top forward prospect is Joakim Kemmel. After putting up 12 goals and 15 points in 43 games for JYP in Liga, Kemmel came over to America to play for the Milwaukee Admirals of the AHL, where he put up 13 points in 14 games, but in the playoffs is where he really shined, tallying 8 goals and 10 points in 14 playoff games. Kemmel was also a part of Finland at the U20 World Junior Championships, where he had 4 points in 5 games. Reed Schaefer, who was acquired in the Matthias Ekholm trade from Edmonton, isn't anything to wow at, but he could be the prototypical Nashville player. Schaefer is a 6'3" power forward who just put up 28 goals and 61 points in 55 games for the Seattle Thunderbird of the WHL, but in the playoffs is where he really took his game to another level, putting up 8 goals and 19 points in 19 games. Jake Neighbors was a first-round pick of the Blues back in 2020. He had a bit of NHL experience last season, appearing in 43 games, putting up 10 points. With an opening on the third line, Neighbors looks to be a major part of the top 9 this season for St. Louis. Selected with the 10th overall pick in the 2023 draft, Dalibor Dvorsky is probably St. Louis's best overall prospect that they have. The highly skilled Slovakian-born forward will definitely be a player to monitor at camp. He's just 18 years old, and although he may not make the roster with their 3 center positions already filled, he could make an impression for next season. Zachary Bolduc was another former first-round pick of the Blues back in 2021. He was a star player on the Quebec Ramparts of the QMJHL, where he put up 50 goals and 110 points in 61 games. In the playoffs, he put up 11 goals and 19 points in 18 games. If Zachary Bolduc really impresses out of camp, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Verona gets knocked to the third line. Once touted as one of the best prospects in the 2022 draft, Brad Lambert slipped and fell all the way to 30 to the Winnipeg Jets. Lambert had a solid season for the Seattle Thunderbird of the WHL, tallying 17 goals and 38 points in 26 games, along with 26 points in 17 playoff games. The adjustment to the AHL, though, was a bit tougher. In 14 games, he only registered 3 points. He also struggled at the U20 World Junior Championship, where he only recorded 1 point in 5 games for Finland. Brad Lambert will really want to show out at camp to show he has improved in his development. Cash Lucius is another former first-round pick of the Winnipeg Jets. After putting up 15 points in 6 games with the Portland Winterhawks, he struggled to adjust to the AHL level, putting up only 5 points in 12 games. He redeemed himself at the U20 World Junior Championships, putting up a point per game. Ville Heinola is a defenseman who was once really highly touted, but for some reason, he has been glossed over time and time again, or the coach's preference to play bigger defensemen. This is definitely a make-or-break year for Heinola. If Heinola is to make the team out of camp, he is either going to have to solidify himself as either a shutdown defenseman or a high-caliber offensive defenseman. Listen to Hockey Wiz Talks podcast on Podbean and Spotify. Leo Carlsson was the 2nd overall pick in the 2023 draft by Anaheim. Carlsson is a jack-of-all-trades type player that can do it all and is an all-situational type player. If he really impresses out of camp, he definitely could make a bad Anaheim Ducks roster. The thing is, do they really want to waste him on a team that will be bad? Owen Zellweger is another player that will make the team out of camp due to the fact that Anaheim's defense is really terrible. Looking at Anaheim's depth chart for defense, the only veterans on that blue line are Cam Fowler and Radko Gudas. The other spots on that blue line could be filled by defensemen who have very little experience. Lucky for them, Zellweger is an elite offensive defenseman who could really suit them well as a top 4 offensive defenseman. He started last season with the Everett Silvertips of the WHL, recording 10 goals and 28 points in 23 games before being traded to the Kamloops Blazers, where he recorded 22 goals and 52 points in 32 games. In the playoffs for the Kamloops Blazers, Zellweger put up 11 goals and 29 points in 14 games as a defenseman. Although he did not register a goal, he put up 6 points in 7 games and was a major part of Canada's power play. Another dynamic offensive defenseman to pay attention to is Pavel Mintyukov. The Russian defenseman was drafted 10th overall by Anaheim in the 2022 draft. He too played for 2 teams last season, but for the OHL. He started with the Saginaw Spirit, putting up 16 goals and 54 points in 37 games, before being traded to the Ottawa 67s, where he put up 8 goals and 34 points in 32 games. In the playoffs for the 67s, Mintyukov registered 9 assists in 11 games. Selected with the 13th overall pick in the 2021 draft, Matthew Coronato is Calgary's most dynamic goal-scoring prospect. Playing for Hartford University last season, Coronato netted 20 goals and 36 points in 34 games. With USA at the World Championships, Coronato netted 3 goals and 8 points in 10 games. There definitely is a spot for him at the top-line right-wing role, pushing Dubé down the depth chart. Jake Pelletier played pretty well on the line with Nazem Kadri and Jonathan Huberdeau towards the end of the season. He put up 7 points in 24 games after completely destroying the AHL circuit with the Calgary Wranglers, where he put up 16 goals and 37 points in 35 games, along with 4 goals and 10 points in 9 playoff games. Connor Zary is the prospect who is going to have to show out. He was a first-round pick in 2020, who netted 21 goals and 58 points in 72 games with the Calgary Wranglers. All 3 of these players could make the team next season. A former first-round pick of the Edmonton Oilers in the 2021 draft is precisely the player that the Edmonton Oilers might need in their lineup. Although Bourgault's stats in the AHL last year do not indicate a top-flight talent, you really don't need a top-flight talent if you're playing them with McDavid or Drysdale. Selected with the 8th overall pick back in 2019, Philip Broberg was expected to be a top 4 caliber defenseman for Edmonton, but he has not become that yet. This is really a make or break year in the last year of his entry deal. Matvei Petrov is a dynamic prospect who may not make the team until the 25-26 season, but if he really impresses out of camp, he could be ahead of the curve. With the North Bay Battalion of the OHL last season, Petrov put up 27 goals and 93 points in 65 games, along with 22 points in 20 games. Brandt Clarke and Tobias Bjornfot are expected to be paired together, at least for the beginning of the season. However, I do not expect this to be the pair for the remainder of the season, as Brandt Clarke should surpass Matt Roy by the midway point of the season. Brandt Clarke is a highly touted prospect who one day should be the top pair defenseman, whereas Tobias Bjornfot is a very solid defensive defenseman. However, he never got a chance to play because of the veteran defenseman ahead of him in the depth chart. Due to salary constraints, it could be finally his year to play. Alex Turcotte was selected with the 5th overall pick back in the 2019 draft. While it's highly unlikely that he ever lifts up to that billing of the 5th overall pick, Alex Turcotte can still be a very good depth player for the LA Kings, whether it be the 3rd or 4th line center. William Eklund is expected to be the Sharks' top line left winger this season, but the Sharks still want to see him show out in camp to verify that he is capable of handling that workload in the NHL. Another player they're going to be paying attention to is Will Smith, the 4th overall pick in the 2023 draft. As long as the Sharks still have Logan Couture, Will Smith will not be on the team. You want Will Smith playing a lot of minutes. Regardless, you still want to see Will Smith show out at training camp. The lesser-known player of this list is Thomas Bordeleau, who netted 22 goals and 41 points in 65 games with the San Jose Barracuda of the AHL. There is a spot on the 4th line center role. There is an opening at the 4th line center position. He is in the running to get that role. Before the 2022 draft, Shane Wright was hyped to be the consensus 1st overall pick, but he slipped to the 4th pick to Seattle. After playing in only 8 games last season, Shane Wright was sent back to the OHL, where he left a less than stellar impression. He only had 37 points in 20 games with the Windsor Spitfires of the OHL, along with 3 points in 4 playoff games. he redeemed himself at the U20 World Junior Championships, where he netted 4 goals and 7 points in 7 games, and helped lead Canada to the gold medal. Edward Sala was selected with the 20th pick in the 2023 draft by Seattle. The Czech-born forward had a solid year in the Czech Republic, putting up 14 points in 43 games in the men's league. At the U18 Hlinka Gretzky Cup, Sala put up 4 goals and 6 points in 5 games, and at the U20 World Junior Championships, he played decent, putting up 6 points. Putting up 6 points in 7 games. If Shane Wright or Edward Sale really want to make the team out of camp, they're going to have to really wow the coaching staff. Yanni Nyman is a solid prospect. However, if Shane Wright cannot make the team, Yanni Nyman definitely won't make the team. Teddy Bluger is not a third-line center, so the third-line center role is very much up for grabs. Lucky for Vancouver, they do have a guy that could fill that role. His name is Aatu Räty. Once projected to be the first overall pick in the 2021 draft, Räty fell all the way to the 52nd pick, where he was selected by the New York Islanders. He was acquired by Vancouver as part of the Bo Horvat trade. If Aatu Räty can impress out of camp with how thin the center depth of Vancouver is, Räty can definitely make the team. Vancouver Canucks fans have been hyping up Jack Rothbone for a long time now. After putting up 31 points in 28 games his final season with Hartford, he has had a less than impressive stint with the Vancouver Canucks. While it's highly unlikely he's ever going to be a high-scoring defenseman, he definitely could transform himself into a steady defensive defenseman who logs heavy minutes. If Connor Garland can play left wing, this following player could earn a spot on the roster. His name is Danila Klimovich. Selected in the second round of the 2021 draft, the Belarusian forward only put up 29 points in 67 games last season for the Abbotsford Canucks of the AHL. However, I do think he's a better option than Phil DiGiuseppe on the third line. Selected with the 29th pick in the 2020 draft, Brendan Brisson's versatility is going to help him make the roster this season. Brisson put up 37 points in 58 games for the Henderson Silver Kings of the AHL. Looking at the roster, there is an opening on that second line left wing role as well as on the third line right wing role. If he can impress out of camp, he could steal a spot from Brett Howden or Mike Amadio. David Enstrom was selected with the 32nd pick in the 2023 draft. The 6'3" center isn't anything to brag about. However, he could make the perfect third line center if the Golden Knights have to trade away Carlson in the future. Pavel Dorofeyev has been a player that kind of got lost in the shuffle of prospects. The former third round pick back in 2019 exploded for 27 goals and 52 points in 63 games with the Silver Kings in the 21-22 season, but fell back down to earth in the 22-23 season where he only registered 9 goals and 17 points in 32 games. Dorofeyev is the perfect player to have on the roster as either an extra forward or a player to plug in the roster in the top 6. Check out my travel channel at youtube.com/@HockeyWizTravels. In my next podcast, I do a very early season preview.